The sound of tearing paper shouldn't echo across a glass-walled conference room, but when Preston Hale, freshly appointed CEO and walking LinkedIn cliché, ripped my stock grant in half and let the pieces fall like sad confetti, you could hear every heartbeat stall. I had just finished presenting our Q2 brand performance. App Store ratings had jumped 38%. User retention hit a record high after our Daily Spark campaign took off on Instagram Reels. And the new logo, it was already being ripped off by knockoff apps in Southeast Asia. I wasn't pitching fluff, I was presenting impact. But Preston leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers like a Bond villain and said, "Karen, this is beautiful. But where's the real value? I'm looking for capital, not creativity." Then he pulled out my grant. The one I'd negotiated after 3 brutal quarterly reviews and a brand refresh that got us covered in Fast Company. "This," he said, waving it like a white flag, "is decorative, not foundational. Rip." My throat tightened. My ears buzzed. But I didn't blink. Not in front of the board. Not in front of the interns pretending to check Slack. I stared at the shredded future he dropped at my feet and replied, "Understood," like he'd told me my coffee would be late. I stood, packed my notes, and walked out heels, tapping like gunfire across polished concrete. And hey, if you're still reading this and haven't subscribed yet, you might be part of the 97% eavesdropping on these war stories without hitting that button. Go ahead, click. It costs nothing and helps power this chaos engine we call a content team. I didn't slam the door, didn't call him a relic. I just left. I wanted them to think I was broken. Silence makes a better threat than shouting. Because here's the thing. Preston tore paper. But I built the blueprint, not the literal code. Don't worry. I'm talking about the voice of the company, the onboarding tone, the product names, the color system, the breadcrumb icons. All of it tied to one clause in an old ignored document from 2020, Clause 14, Derivative Identity Assets. I wrote Clause 14 back when the company still ran out of a converted yoga studio in Rhino. Same place where the whiteboard wall flaked dry erase ink into our pad thai. We couldn't afford outside counsel, so I read every contract myself, eyes burning at 2 a.m., squinting at PDFs over stale grocery store ramen. I knew the day would come. The day some MBA golden boy would stroll in with a spreadsheet, dismiss 5 years of blood and clarity as fluff, and try to carve the soul out of what I'd built. That night, I got home, kicked off my shoes, and poured a couple fingers of bourbon. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Break Glass. Inside, my original contract notarized. A full ledger of visual assets. Every timestamp design copy set. Color gradient tone guide all tied to my LLC, unless explicitly waived in writing. Spoiler, they never waived a thing. Meanwhile, Preston Hale was probably strutting around the office like he'd taught a masterclass in executive authority. The board, a bunch of finance bros who thought UX meant you moved buttons around. They didn't know branding only balance sheets. They thought logos just happened. That UX tone was fairy dust. It would take them weeks to realize they didn't own the house they'd just evicted the architect. When I left, I didn't take a single thing from my desk. No branded tote bag, no farewell cupcakes, just my leather notebook, dog-eared, scuffed, and marked with 5 years of battles. And I walked. Past the marketing team, mid-gift debate. Past interns clacking keyboards like background actors. Past Evan in product, who mouthed, "I'm sorry," but didn't speak. No one followed. They just watched like someone had died. And maybe someone had the Karen who used to explain the why behind every pixel. The Q2 slide still flickered on the glass wall charts of churn rates, retention wins, and voice share growth completely orphaned. HR intercepted me at the elevator. Kelly, mid-level, mid-witted, smiled awkwardly under her banana print skirt. "Hi, just letting you know your resignation's accepted. We'll begin offboarding now. Please return any devices by end of day." I blinked. I didn't resign. "Oh, haha, Preston said you did. Or that you were leaving voluntarily. So, yeah, it's all processed." I stepped into the elevator without a word. The doors closed on Kelly's anxious smile and the clatter of her acrylic nails on that chipped company-issued keyboard. I swear I could still hear her typing as I hit the parking level. Down in the garage, I sat in my car for 10 solid minutes. No crying, no shaking, just letting the silence bleach through me like cold light. I thought about launch week, how I stayed behind each night, rewriting 600 error messages by hand, because the auto-generated ones read like a bank fax. Thought about the time Preston emailed me, make it pop more in response to a rebrand that took 2 months and 3 full AB rounds. But mostly I thought about Clause 14, the clause I'd buried in that contract 2 years ago. The clause they never read. Back home, I fed the cat, kicked off my boots, and opened the fireproof lockbox in the closet. Inside the original agreement, printed, signed, protected. Clause 14, derivative identity assets. Every visual, every product name, every navigation flow, every gradient and icon and line of UX copy, all licensed to my LLC, unless explicitly waived in writing. And guess what? They never waived a damn thing. They assumed because I wore neutral tones and didn't raise my voice that I was agreeable. They didn't know I'd seen women like me get quietly erased for years. Not this time. I wasn't going to be a name deleted from the About page before Monday. I let them believe they'd won. Let them run victory laps over a hollow foundation while Preston adjusted his cufflinks and practiced buzzwords in the mirror. I poured another drink, opened my laptop, and logged into the IP registry. I didn't need to strike. Not yet. That was the elegance of it. All I had to do was wait. Let them touch the assets. Redesign, repackage, push and update. The moment they changed anything, they'd be outside the license and on my turf. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. 2 days after I left, Clara from UX sent a blurry photo, a whiteboard, scrawled with rebrand sprint all hands in red marker. Like a hostage note. Under it, new logo. Rename Moments. Less feminine. Find outside help. Classic Preston. They were already tearing it apart. Preston probably thought slapping a new typeface and recoloring a few buttons would trick people into thinking the product had evolved. Throw on a fresh coat of digital paint and call it innovation. He didn't realize brand isn't lipstick, it's plumbing. You rip out the foundation and everything leaks. By Wednesday, they'd brought in some budget agency out of Austin Minty Blank, one of those all-caps branding boutiques that charges 5 figures for a hex code and a Helvetica variant. Out of curiosity, I checked their Behance portfolio. It looked like a graveyard of generic SaaS logos that belonged on vitamin bottles or B2B sleep apps. Most of the gradients gave me actual eye strain. And this was who they trusted to replace a user experience I'd woven thread by thread for 5 years. I almost felt insulted. Almost. Meanwhile, I updated my IP registry quietly, carefully, logged a few new timestamps, filed a fresh certificate on interface naming conventions, even had a backdated statement of authorship notarized. Receipts matter more than rage. I wasn't here to rant, I was here to build a case. Out of curiosity, I logged into the developer dashboard. Sure enough, the branding license originator still read K. Doyle IP LLC. Arial 12 point. Undeniable. They hadn't even reassigned it. Or maybe they didn't know how. Preston didn't read dashboards, he read budget summaries and revenue projections with buzzwords like agile and scalable. The only brand he cared about came stitched on polos. Back in that Denver office, the chaos was simmering. I knew it because the in-house design teams, LinkedIn's, started coming back to life, new likes, refreshed bios, sudden follows of brand consultants in New York. That's the design world version of sending up a flare. Clara even messaged again. This time, it wasn't gossip, it was coded distress. Do you remember if the Moments icons were SVG or PNG? Do you still have the old tone guide, No Clara? I don't. Preston's first mistake. Thinking brand was visual fluff, something you could fix with templates. His second, thinking. He could rebuild it without me. Every pixel they touched pulled them one step further into breach. They were walking barefoot into a minefield I'd planted with manicured precision. I didn't need a lawyer yet. That part would come later. For now, I watched from a distance as they stitched together their Frankenstein broken layouts, clashing tones, soulless fonts that looked like intern templates. And I smiled, because I knew what they didn't. You can't fake soul. And if you're ready to see what happens when the tables finally turn, go ahead and hit subscribe. I promise, the next chapter isn't just satisfying. It's earned. You can't outsource instinct, and you sure as hell can't build a future on arrogance and pastel gradients. Let them recolor. Let them rename moments to journeys. Let them slap Fiverr logos over foundation cracks. Every adjustment pulled them deeper into breach territory. The best part, they still thought they were in control. It started as a whisper, a stray tweet, a grumble in a product subreddit. Anyone else feel like the app's weird now? Where'd moments go? They changed the logo. Looks like a pharmacy app now. Why do the buttons feel like a sad Canva template? By Friday, it was open revolt. The loyal users, the ones who defended us in beta, who'd carried the brand on their shoulders, were turning on the product like wolves sniffing a carcass. They didn't know about Clause 14. They didn't need to. They just knew something was missing. I was on my second glass of Bordeaux, curled up on my couch with the fireplace going and Reddit lighting up my screen. Someone posted a side-by-side of the login screens, mine and theirs. Caption one of these was made by someone who gave a damn. I laughed. Ugly laughed. Preston didn't. Inside the office, things were cracking. A product update failed Apple's brand continuity check. Their message, coldly polite, unresolved asset history conflict. Preston thought it was a bug. Had engineers tearing through code they didn't write and didn't understand. But it wasn't the code. It was wrapped around the code. Invisible threads, metadata fingerprints, digital DNA. Every asset still whispered my name. Design QA started flagging anomalies in the asset libraries. The new journeys icons just recycled moments-triggered hash mismatches. The system was telling the truth. Preston refused to hear. This wasn't theirs to fix, because it had never been theirs to break. The internal asset verification tool started tossing red flags like confetti. But the real kicker, a compliance bot they'd set up to scan for third-party licensing violations, sent a high-priority alert straight to legal. Subject line, potential IP conflict. Asset cluster, M17 license holder. K. Doyle IP, LLC. Their own system had snitched. I pictured the legal team blinking at their screens in slow horror. Who is K. Doyle? Wait, Karen Doyle. Then the digging. Then the realization, and that's when Preston began holding emergency touchpoints, which in his language meant shouting at junior staff while double-fisting Celsius and canceling meetings he'd set up himself. Word reached me through the grapevine he'd actually banned the word brand in the office for 24 hours. Said it was derailing the product roadmap. Meanwhile, the roadmap was burning, the car had no wheels, and he was trying to steer with a mirror. Classic. The agency they brought in Blanc, or maybe it was Minty, ghosted as soon as the word litigation was even whispered. Sent an invoice with a 48-hour deadline, then vanished. And the best part, I hadn't lifted a finger. No email, no press leak, not even a passive-aggressive tweet. The system was doing exactly what I designed it to do, protect my work. Because unlike Preston's band of clueless decorators, I had a plan. I built everything like a cathedral, not a weekend project. Every icon tagged, every tone guideline registered, every product flow licensed. While backlash bubbled across Twitter and the App Store rejected yet another update, I sipped my wine and read the latest gem. Whoever designed the old UX, I hope you're thriving. You made me trust this app. Now it feels like a spreadsheet in drag. Thriving, indeed. Then came the email. Subject. Hope. Your quick question about brand legacy. I didn't even open it. Just smiled, let the irony marinate, and filed it under evidence at phase 2. They were panicking now. You could hear it in their tone. Gone was the arrogance, the condescension. Now it was corporate desperation. The kind that leaks right before lawsuits hit the vents. What triggered it, Clause 14? Some poor junior associate fresh out of Georgetown finally read the fine print. They were scrambling for anything that might legally mop up the disaster Preston had lit with his ego and a matchbook labeled Agile Branding. What they found instead was reality. When you license all identity assets to your own LLC and never waive ownership, you own them. Fully. That includes derivative works. So the second they renamed Moments to Journeys and pushed it live violation. The app's source of truth library was now a legal biohazard. Buttons, header treatments, voice tone, push, copy, even the cute little loading animation with the orbiting circles, all mine, tied to me through a lattice of licenses, timestamps, and IP registrations that looked like the FBI pinned them up with red string. Preston reacted the way men like Preston always do when faced with consequences, he barked. Rewrite everything. Rebuild it from scratch. Use AI. Just make it different. They flew in a new contractor team from New York, some jittery ex-agency creative director with a portfolio full of glassy gradients and startup collapses. Their mission, rebrand the rebrand. But the timeline was doomed. The product was already in the wild and breaking. Users were uninstalling the app in waves, leaving App Store reviews that read like obituaries, RIP. This used to feel human. Now it looks like a DMV kiosk. Feels like a knockoff dating app in grayscale. Legal tried to triage. They emailed me again. Hi, Karen, hope all's well. We'd love to briefly consult on brand continuity as we transition into a new chapter. A new chapter. Like this was a university alumni magazine and not an IP hemorrhage. I didn't respond. Satisfaction isn't loud. It's the silence right before the roof gives in. Then came their last-ditch update. Engineers stayed overnight. Legal double-checked every pixel. Design uploaded the blandest, safest build imaginable. They clicked submit. 3 hours later, Apple flagged it. Rejected. Violation of existing asset history. Derivative branding usage without confirmed waiver. Registered owner K. Doyle IP LLC. I imagined Preston reading that rejection in a sprint meeting. Room goes quiet. Faces go pale. That specific kind of silence where no one wants to be the first to say it, there's no next move. Because now, they didn't have a brand. At least not one they could legally touch. Who signed off on that clause? Answer, they did. No one reads the fine print until it's engraved in the hull of the ship and the water's already halfway up the stairs. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the app disappeared from the U.S. App Store. By 12:06, it was gone in Canada. Then Germany, Australia, Japan. By 12:11, it was over. All 4 of their flagship products pulled. Apple's takedown notice didn't sugarcoat a thing, violation of registered IP licensing terms. Ownership conflict unresolved. Reinstatement pending rights resolution. Then Google followed suit with a copy-paste of Apple's reasoning. It almost felt petty, like even they were tired of Preston's nonsense. The websites blinked offline an hour later. The front-end assets blocked. Auto CDN filters flagged them due to ownership metadata conflicts. Their content delivery provider had synced with the very registry I'd updated 3 weeks earlier. Yep, that registry. The one where every brand-facing element pointed back to K. Doyle IP LLC. And just like that, the lights went out. I watched it unfold from my living room barefoot in sweatpants, a glass of Cabernet, in hand Fiona Apple humming softly through my speakers. The irony, delicious. A woman whispering fury while a man's empire quietly choked on its own pride. By 12:15, my phone lit up like Christmas. Board members, former contractors, a product manager I hadn't heard from in a year. Some messages were frantic. Others were drenched in guilt. One just read, "Holy shit." Then came the headlines. Crunch startup darling faces. IP meltdown after founding creative resigns. Fast company rebrand to nowhere. How a CEO's ego crashed a unicorn, The Verge. The woman who owned the brand literally. I hadn't said a word to the press. Didn't need to. Murdera doesn't lie. My name was right there in the copyright filings, time-stamped and ironclad. I wasn't staging a scene. I was enforcing a contract. And the internet, ate it up. By 12:45, investors started quietly pulling out. 3 VC firms updated portfolios without explanation. 2 enterprise clients froze rollout contracts. 1 Preston's biggest SaaS partner walked with a single email. Back inside that Denver office, I pictured Preston flailing. "She can't do this." He probably barked tie-askew shirt damp with failure. But I could, and I did. And it was completely legal. I did. And I wasn't even in the building. I'd left silence behind like a pressure trigger, and now it was detonating one system, one contract clause at a time. This wasn't revenge porn. This wasn't sabotage. It was a quiet, strategic unraveling of a structure that never should have been built without its architect. And in the center of it all, I was calm. The kind of calm that settles in after years of being talked over, of watching your name vanish from project decks, of hearing words like decorative and soft skills written in annual reviews like a branding death sentence. No shouting, no interviews, just noise-canceling headphones, a glass of red, and Fiona Apple crooning through the speakers. Kick me under the table all you want. I won't shut up. I didn't have to say anything. The code had already been written. The system was just following instructions. They once told me branding was emotion. Ephemeral. Disposable. Turns out it was infrastructure. And I was the last one holding the blueprints. At 2:04 a.m., my phone lit up like a Vegas slot machine in free spin mode. 28 missed calls. 12 from numbers I didn't know. 4 from someone saved as bored Cheryl, who once told me my push notifications felt too emotional. 2 from Preston, straight to voicemail, and 1 from Clara. Just 5 words they're unraveling. It's bad. But there was one message I listened to. Hal Travers, senior board member. The man who always shook hands, like he was sealing a peace treaty. His voice was hollow, now scrubbed of charm. "Karen, Miss Doyle, I'll be frank. This is bad. We didn't fully understand the licensing structure and, well, just name your terms. Please, let's fix this." There it was. Not "we miss you." Not "you were right." Just name your terms. Because the value of my silence had officially outpaced the price of their pride. I got up, tied my hair back, cracked my knuckles, and opened the PDF I'd been fine-tuning for weeks. Licensing, buyback agreement, K. Doyle IP Holdings, LLC. It was crisp, ruthless, legal poetry. Clause 1, full retransfer of all identity asset rights. Clause 2, licensing fee at 3x market rate, rounded up, never down. Clause 3, retroactive compensation, equal to the value of the shredded stock grant adjusted to current market cap. Clause 4, immediate resignation of CEO Preston Hale, submitted no later than 5:00 p.m. Friday, with a full public statement citing creative misalignment. Clause 5, no NDA, no non-compete, no edits. And my personal favorite, Clause 6 offer expires in 48 hours. After that, every licensed asset would become permanently non-transferable. No grace period, no second chance. I didn't use fancy fonts, just Calibri, black and white, surgical. I attached the document to an email. No greeting, no sign-off. Subject line, per your voicemail. Then I hit send. No follow-up, no typing bubble. Just that satisfying whoosh, the sound of consequences. Because this wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even personal anymore. This was billing. They had 48 hours to decide if they wanted their company back or if they wanted to keep spinning circles in legal limbo, hoping for a miracle that didn't exist. While they scrambled to review, to redact, to negotiate, I poured another drink, opened Spotify, and queued up some Philip Glass. I didn't need to watch what came next. I already knew. Preston wasn't surviving the next board meeting, investors wouldn't tolerate another hit, and there was no way they'd rebuild the brand from scratch, not when they couldn't even rebuild a login screen. They thought I was gone, but I wasn't. I'd just been waiting, letting the invoice mature, and they didn't even wait for business hours. At 6:27 a.m., 4 hours after my email landed, the board called an emergency session. The kind where everyone logs in, half-dressed and overly caffeinated, muting themselves only to swear off camera. The meeting minutes called it a strategic recalibration. Internally, it was an execution. Preston Hale, CEO disruptor, king of the buzzword, was removed by unanimous vote. The official statement, a diplomatic exit due to evolving brand vision. A sprinkle of synergy, a dash of misalignment. But behind closed doors, they weren't saving a legacy. They were cauterizing a wound before the shareholders went feral. I didn't blink, didn't smile. I just sat in my attorney's office cool oak table, quiet hum of the AC flipping through the revised agreement page by page. Every clause I'd outlined was present down to the letter. Preston Hale's resignation ink wasn't even dry. The licensing buyback fee paid in full. The shredded stock grant, retroactively restored, vested at current value. There was even a note in the margin confirming that App Store reinstatement would be processed within the hour. I initialed each page in silence. No gloating, no commentary, just the soft scrape of pen on paper. When I signed the final document, my attorney slid it back into the envelope like we were sealing a casket. "Anything else you want?" "Added," he asked. I shook my head. "No, this is enough, because power doesn't need to scream, not when it pulls like gravity." At exactly 9:00 a.m., the apps returned to the App Store, quietly. No splashy announcements, no banners, just back. But if you look closely, the fingerprints were there. My name embedded in the metadata. The visual hierarchy back to my original framework. The tone realigned to the voice I wrote from scratch. Then came the PR spin. The company dropped a press release within the hour. "We're excited to welcome back Karen Doyle in a strategic capacity as we evolve our mission. Her foundational work helped shape the product's identity, and her return marks a bold new chapter in brand leadership." The press jumped on it. Senior designer returns to rescue brand. IP crisis averted after leadership shakeup. How one woman owned the brand, literally. My inbox flooded. Congratulatory emails, speaking invites, back-channel offers I'd never entertain. The same execs who once ghosted me now CC'd me on everything. They even sent flowers. Twice. But the moment I'll remember came in the form of a call. Blocked number. I picked up without thinking. And there he was. Preston Hale. His voice was guttural, raw, like something inside had been scraped hollow. "I didn't know." He stammered. "I didn't realize I cut him off. You should have read what you signed." Then I hung up. No threats, no rage, just closure. He tried to erase me with red ink. But in the end, it was white paper clinical binding that buried him. I wasn't back at the company. I was above it. Licensor. Architect. Quiet storm. They didn't own me. They licensed access to my mind. And next time, they'd pay up front. Friday. 5:00 p.m. That hour when offices pretend to wind down, but everyone's just refreshing Slack, waiting to see who panics first. I was home, curtains drawn, calm. The storm had passed, and I didn't even need to raise my voice. I opened my laptop, logged into the new admin portal. The login screen had changed. Gone was the clunky interface they'd rushed together in their branding meltdown. What greeted me now was familiar, the one I designed 3 years ago. A soft gradient, a gentle 3-second fade before the dashboard loaded. Subtle, seamless. They'd reverted to the original system, because they had to. The new agreement gave them usage rights, but I still owned it. Welcome to K. Doyle IP Holdings, LLC. The interface loaded cleanly, pulling up the company's full visual asset management system, logos, tone libraries, onboarding sequences, color architecture, typography systems. Every breadcrumb restored, licensed, not owned. I scrolled to the internal brand guide, the back-end tool the design team relied on to stay consistent. It used to be called Beacon. Now I'd renamed it Worthless, TM. The trademark symbol wasn't decorative, it was intentional. I hovered over the Merida tag editor, and typed one last clause into the shared brand guide: all brand contributions subject to legal review and royalty. Unauthorized use constitutes breach of contract. Nothing flashy, no drama, just 12-point font and quiet permanence. There would be no more shrugging off women's work, no more soft skills buried beneath KPIs while guys in fleece vests took credit for retention metrics. Not anymore. This was my signature, not the kind you leave on a farewell card, but the kind that lives in a footer and silently dictates the rules of engagement. I leaned back, watched the sunset melt over downtown Denver. My phone buzzed investor pitch. New startup, big budget. We'd love your magic touch. They even called me a brand whisperer. Please. I smiled, then hit decline. I wasn't whispering anymore. I closed the laptop, poured 2 fingers of whiskey. No ice, no inbox, no Slack. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing everything they tried to erase had become their foundation, and they'd pay for every pixel. This wasn't revenge. This was recognition with interest. Curtain dropped. Read your contracts, boys. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated, erased, or told your work was soft? Drop a comment below and let's make space for the stories they tried to silence. Because quiet doesn't mean weak, and legal clarity is power. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect your work, document everything, and never confuse politeness with passivity. Support matters, and your voice does too. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe in the long game, because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy.